Some roads are meant to be traveled alone. But what happens when you're not as alone as you think? Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true stories from people who picked up hitchhikers they wish they never met. Stories from empty roads where the darkness hides more than just shadows. These are tales that will make you think twice before stopping for that lonely figure on the roadside. Let's begin. It was November 2019, and I'd been driving trucks for nearly 15 years. I thought I'd seen everything these highways to offer. I was wrong. I was hauling a load from Denver to Salt Lake City, taking the lonely stretch through Wyoming. It was around 2 in the morning, one of those nights where the darkness feels thick, almost solid. The kind of night where your headlights seem to barely cut through the black. There wasn't another car in sight for miles. That's when I saw her. A woman, standing on the shoulder of the road, wearing a white dress that seemed to glow in my headlights. Her thumb was out, the universal sign for help. Now, I have a strict policy about hitchhikers. I don't pick them up, ever. But something about her made me slow down. Maybe it was the complete isolation of the road. Maybe it was the fact that she looked so vulnerable out there in the middle of nowhere. I pulled over. As she walked toward the truck, I got a better look at her. Young, maybe mid-20s, with long dark hair that hung wet against her white dress. That should have been my first warning. It hadn't rained in days, and there was no water anywhere nearby. But I rationalized it. Maybe she'd had car trouble, walked from a creek, I don't know. The mind makes excuses when it doesn't want to accept what it's seeing. She climbed into the passenger seat without saying a word. The cab immediately went cold. I'm talking frost on the windows cold, and I had the heater running full blast. She just stared straight ahead, not looking at me, not speaking. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. "Home," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the engine. "Where's home?" "Just drive." Something in her tone made me listen. I put the truck in gear and continued down the highway. Every few minutes I'd glance over at her. She never moved, never blinked, just stared straight ahead with this blank expression that made my skin crawl. And that smell, God, that smell, like stagnant water and decay. We drove for maybe 20 minutes in complete silence. Then, without warning, she spoke again. "This is where I died." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "Right here, 10 years ago. He promised he'd give me a ride home." I slammed on the brakes, and the truck skidded to a stop. When I turned to look at her, the passenger seat was empty, completely empty. The door hadn't opened. I hadn't heard anything. She was just gone. But the seat was soaking wet, and there was a small puddle of water on the floor where she'd been sitting. I got out of that truck and looked around frantically. There was nothing, no one, just empty highway stretching in both directions under the pale moonlight. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I searched for news articles. And I found it. 10 years prior, almost to the day, a young woman named Sarah Mitchell had been hitchhiking on that exact stretch of road. She'd accepted a ride from a man who, instead of taking her home, murdered her and dumped her body in a reservoir 15 miles away. They found her 3 weeks later. She was wearing a white dress. I don't drive that route anymore. I don't care how much extra time it takes to go around, and I never, ever pick up hitchhikers. Because sometimes the dead don't stay buried. Sometimes they're still trying to get home.
I'm Jennifer, and I'm a college student, or I was, before I took a semester off to deal with what happened. Some experiences change you, and you can't just go back to normal life afterward. It was spring break of 2021, and I was driving home from visiting friends in Portland. I'd stayed later than planned, so I was on the road around midnight, taking the back roads through rural Oregon to avoid the highway traffic. Stupid decision number 1. The road wound through dense forest, the kind where the trees crowd so close to the asphalt that their branches form a tunnel overhead. My phone had lost signal about 30 miles back, and I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The radio had dissolved into static, so I was driving in silence except for the sound of my tires on the road. That's when I saw him in my headlights. A boy, maybe 12 or 13, standing in the middle of the road. He was wearing a red hoodie and jeans, and he was completely still. I slammed on my brakes and stopped about 10 feet away from him. My heart was pounding. Had I almost hit a kid? I rolled down my window. "Hey, are you okay? Are you lost?" He didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there. I put the car in park and got out, which was probably stupid decision number 2. As I walked toward him, I called out again, "Where are your parents? Do you need help?" That's when he tilted his head up and I saw his face. Or rather, where his face should have been. It was completely smooth. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just blank, pale skin stretched over where his features should be. I stumbled backward, a scream catching in my throat. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But he moved toward me, his head still tilted at that unnatural angle, and I could hear this sound, like breathing but wet and labored, even though he had no mouth. I ran back to my car, my hands fumbling with the door handle. Every second felt like an hour. I could hear footsteps behind me on the asphalt, slow and deliberate. I got in and locked the door. He was standing right next to my window now, his blank face pressed against the glass, and then he did something that still haunts my nightmares. Where his mouth should have been, the skin started to split open, tearing vertically down the middle of his face, revealing darkness underneath. Not a throat, not tissue, just darkness, an endless void. And from that void came a voice. "Why didn't you stop?" I floored the accelerator. My tires screeched as I swerved around him and took off down the road. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the middle of the empty road, getting smaller and smaller, but that split in his face was still visible, still open. I drove straight through the night, didn't stop until I reached a gas station in a town with lights and people. I was shaking so badly that the attendant asked if I needed them to call someone. I just bought coffee and sat in my car under the fluorescent lights for 2 hours until the sun came up. Later, I did research. I found stories online from other people who'd driven that road, stories about a boy in a red hoodie who appears in the middle of the night. Some people say he's a kid who died in a hit and run in the 90s, that the driver never stopped, never even slowed down. Now he stops others, asking the question he never got to ask. Why didn't you stop? I transferred schools after that semester. I couldn't handle being anywhere near that road, that forest, that darkness. And I never drive alone at night anymore. Never. Because I know what's out there, standing in the middle of empty roads, waiting for the next car that doesn't stop in time.
My name is David, and I'm a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company. My job has me driving all over the Southwest, often at odd hours. I've always been comfortable driving at night, past tense, because after what happened last October, I can barely stand to be on the road after dark. I was driving from Phoenix to Albuquerque, taking Highway 60 through some of the most desolate parts of Arizona. If you've never driven through the desert at night, you can't understand the isolation. It's not like forest roads where you're surrounded by trees. In the desert, you can see for miles in every direction, and there's nothing, just endless darkness and stars. I'd been on the road for about 3 hours when I saw the figure on the side of the highway, a man standing perfectly still with his thumb out. I could see him from about half a mile away because my headlights were the only lights in a 50-mile radius. I wasn't going to stop. I really wasn't. But as I got closer, I could see he was well dressed, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt. He had a briefcase next to him. He looked like someone who'd had car trouble, a business traveler, stranded. He looked normal. I slowed down. He smiled and waved, a friendly, grateful smile, and that's what convinced me to pull over. He walked up to the passenger window and I rolled it down. "Car trouble?" I asked. "Something like that," he said, still smiling. "I'd really appreciate a lift to the next town." "Hop in." He got in, placing his briefcase on his lap. The smile never left his face, not for a second. And I mean that literally. As we drove, as we talked, even when he was looking out the window, that smile was locked in place, unnaturally wide, showing too many teeth. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to ignore the growing unease in my gut. "I meet people," he said, "on roads like this, late at night, when they're all alone." The way he said it made my mouth go dry. "That's an unusual job. It's more of a calling, really." His head swiveled toward me, the smile stretching even wider. "I've been doing it for a very long time." That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't breathing. His chest wasn't moving at all, and in the dim light from the dashboard, I could see that his skin had a waxy, artificial quality, like a mannequin. "I think I need to pull over," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm feeling sick." "No," he said simply, and his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His fingers were ice cold and impossibly strong. "Keep driving." I tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. The car swerved, and I had to use my other hand to keep us on the road. "Let go of me!" "Not yet," he said, that smile never wavering. "You picked me up. Now you have to take me where I need to go." "Where? Where do you need to go?" He leaned in close, and I could smell something awful on his breath, like grave dirt and chemicals. "To the place where the road ends." I don't know what came over me, but I slammed on the brakes with everything I had. The car skidded to a stop, and in the chaos, his grip loosened for just a second. I wrenched my hand free, threw the car into park, and ran into the desert. I didn't care that it was pitch black. I didn't care that I was miles from anywhere. I just ran. Behind me, I heard my car door open, heard footsteps, and heard him call out in a voice that was still smiling. "We all end up where the road ends, David. I'll see you there." I ran until I couldn't run anymore. Then I hid behind a rock formation and waited. Hours. I waited hours until the sun started to rise. When there was enough light, I carefully made my way back to where I'd left the car. It was still there, engine running, driver's door open, but he was gone. The passenger door was closed, and on the seat where he'd been sitting, there was his briefcase. I almost left it, almost got in the car and drove away, but something made me open it. Inside, there were photographs, dozens of them, Polaroids of people in cars taken from the passenger seat. Different people, different cars, spanning what looked like decades based on the clothing and vehicle styles. And in every single photo, the person driving looked terrified. The most recent photo was me, taken sometime during our drive, showing me gripping the steering wheel, my face pale with fear. And I never saw him take it. I reported it to the police, but what could I tell them? That I picked up something that wasn't human? They took my statement about a weird hitchhiker and filed it away, but I kept those photos. I scanned them and tried to identify some of the people. 3 of them I found. All 3 of them had disappeared on desert highways in Arizona and New Mexico, years apart. None of them were ever found. I don't drive alone at night anymore. When I have to travel for work, I fly, or I drive during the day. And when I see hitchhikers now, I don't slow down. I don't even look, because sometimes what's standing on the side of the road isn't human. And once you let it in, it doesn't matter how fast you drive. You can't escape what you've invited into your life.
3 stories, 3 encounters, 3 people who stopped when they shouldn't have. The roads we travel are filled with mysteries, some of which are better left unsolved. The next time you see someone standing alone on a dark highway, thumb extended, asking for help, remember these stories. Remember that sometimes the person you pick up might not be a person at all. Sometimes there's something that's been waiting for someone like you to come along. Drive safe, and whatever you do, don't pick up hitchhikers on empty roads, because you never know who or what might get in your car.